Welcome to the official season finale of Season 1 of Talking to Teachers. My name is Chris Height, and today I'm joined by a familiar face here at the CBA Digital Network, our fearless leader, Mr. Jason Lutz. Mr. Lutz is the media director, sailing coach, digital network moderator, and teacher of the digital media courses here at the Academy. How are you doing today, Mr. Lutz?
Good. Thanks for having me, Chris. I appreciate being on the season finale. I think this is my second time I've been on a podcast here at CBA. I'll give a shout out to Aiden Broderick and Jack Coleman, who back in the spring of 2018 had me on their season finale of their podcast. So I like to only come on season finales of podcasts.
Season finale regular here at the CBA DN. So I'm going to hit you with a hard-hitting question to start, Mr. Lutz. What inspired you to pursue the career of media and journalism?
That's a very good question. What I would say is that writing was something I was always good at as a kid. I was definitely not good at math, which means I probably wasn't good at science, and writing came easy to me. So whether I was in English class or history class, any of the classes that involved heavy writing, I usually had a pretty good grade in. So I was like, okay, well, I'm good at this writing thing. And then, like a lot of kids now, and like yourself, I was into sports, and the easy thing to write about is sports. And so I started writing about sports just kind of in my free time, on Microsoft Word back in the day, just like typing things out that no one would ever read. But I was good at writing, and so media and journalism in general. And I always thought I was going to be a writer in a newspaper. And now, obviously, the landscape has changed over the years, right? And so now we're doing a lot more of this, whether it's podcasting or video, video stories, those kind of things. And so the traditional journalism that I grew up with and I envisioned myself doing, it doesn't exist in the same way anymore. And so obviously my media, the idea of what I was going to do in media has evolved over a lot of time. And I think in college, I got really into broadcasting. I was a multimedia concentration within my communications major. I worked for the College of Charleston Athletic Department as a student broadcaster and media assistant. And I was like, well, I like this. This is the field I probably want to go into. So now, did I ever think I was going to be sitting here with you as a faculty member at CBA doing some sort of media job? No, but I'm happy I'm here today.
Yeah, now you're passing off all that knowledge that you've learned to us and on to the generations. Now, talking about generations with Aiden Broderick and Jack Coleman, I got to ask you, what were the origins of the CBA Digital Network? How did it start?
So yes, Aiden and Jack were two of the early members, probably in the first kind of class of the CBA DN. So the origins kind of came through what I kind of just mentioned, how the landscape was changing in all of media. But if you look at specifically high schools, we realized, and I got to give out a shout out to our former athletic director, Vito Chevroletti, who, he had the idea to create an athletics website, and we were trying to brainstorm what we could do with that site that was different. And in 2017, 2018, and your brother was part of it, was that we realized we should start streaming our sports games, because that we could kind of tell that was where this was all going. And now, obviously, in 2023, every high school streams every game in some sort of capacity, specifically, basketball and a lot of hockey and kind of the stuff that we do. And so Coach Vito and I, we were like, all right, how are we going to do this? And, we found Mascot Media. They seemed to be good partners. For a reasonable price. We invested in all the equipment, a lot of the stuff we still use today. And we started with the very first Founders Cup game, which was February of 2017, I believe. And at that point, we didn't even have a student base yet to fill the broadcast. So I actually did the first broadcast with a classmate of mine, CBA alumnus and basketball alumnus, Matt McMullen, and him and I did the first broadcast. And as much as I liked doing that, and again, it was a lot of fun, and Matt was one of my good friends here in high school, but I was like, we got to get kids involved in this. Like, we should do this. This should be student run. I see a lot of our other student run activities here. it should be student run with a moderator that really cares, but let's give the students the drive to kind of make it their own. And so after that initial broadcast, we developed the student base. That's kind of how the digital network as a club got started. And then as it evolved, we added the homeroom to make sure that I met with the kids every day. Your brother was in the first homeroom that we did back in 2019, 2020. Unfortunately, that was cut short by the pandemic, but we had a lot of fun up until that point. So again, I think it was a realization that we should do this. We should try to get in front of it, which I think we did. And we were kind of the first one to offer this. Now everybody's doing it, and I like to think a lot of people have, used our model for themselves, which again, imitation is the greatest form of flattery, as a lot of people like to say.
Yeah, I think we're, I'm not trying to brag about us, but we're such a high quality network. And I think other schools do a really good job. But I think what's been created here at CBA is just truly fantastic. All the commentating and the student run stuff, I'm sure you could attest to that.
I think that the worst thing I think is to become complacent about it. I do think we do a really good job. I would love to expand it. And Coach Maz and I always talk about how we could get outdoor sports games broadcasted, because that's kind of that's probably our next step. If we're talking about pure broadcasting, outdoor games is the hardest thing to do. We've done some. We've done some soccer. We've done some lacrosse in the past. We did audio only of baseball, but it's really tough to do outdoor games if you don't have the right equipment and the right setup. And now with our new facilities, we're trending in that right direction. We did Keene Field broadcast where we have actually a dedicated area up at the top of the bleachers, but we still need to get, work out some connectivity issues, like those things. Again, those are natural things to work through. But that's probably that was where I would like to go more, is more outdoor games. But I think we really do the indoor gym games, whether it's, gym and hockey. So we do basketball, wrestling in the varsity gym. And we do hockey down at Jersey Shore Arena, and I think we've done those really, really well, and that's great because it's always a different group of kids, right? So, being able to do it with a different group of kids every time, and again, you have some repeats, and there's some, I know like GC and Manoli loved hockey this year.
Great, yeah.
You and Connor loved basketball, and so everybody kind of has their own thing, but, everybody then kind of gets into the rhythm, and it becomes a really good, well-oiled machine.
Yeah, we really run well, especially this year. And speaking of this year, I got to ask, we've had a lot of fun moments this year, a lot of newer faces this year compared to last year, because I've been in it since freshman year. But what were some of your favorite moments from this specific year of the CBA Digital Network?
Well, real quick, you mentioned last year. Last year we had such a good senior class. And I could go through the list, but two guys I think of right away off the bat. Chris Earn and Ryan Reagan, they were like the workhorses for us last year. And those two did a lot of work behind the scenes. They weren't always looking for the in front of the camera credit. They ended up getting a lot of it, and that was because they worked so hard. But I think about them. I think about, Chris Carino and Hugh on the basketball broadcasts. I know that Simbinos loved hockey. We missed Chris on those hockey games. And then, Antonucci and Nardiello. And, there was such a good group of kids. And then, so we graduated a lot last year. And so now we got to think, how do we evolve? And so I was kind of nervous to, I still had, you were a returner. Connor was a returner, but then we had to fill in the rest with some new guys. They weren't completely new. Dylan and Joe, they helped me out some last year, but they weren't full on, in it every day. But I think that's what good teams do, right? They rebuild, and we rebuilt really nicely this year, and I'm really happy with how it ended up. And I said this to Connor at the beginning of the year because he was the senior kind of leader. I said, Connor, every year is going to be different. What you saw last year, and you could probably say the same, is that it's not going to be the same. Nothing is ever going to be the same. It can be similar, but it's not going to be the same. And so we were tasked with rebuilding, or more like retooling, right? It was a retooling. And we had a really good year. And I think for favorite moments, it's funny because when you ask me that question, I don't necessarily think of one specific moment. But what I do think about is we had a lot of little moments that were funny. There was a lot of I think this was a very comedic group. I mean, first thing that pops in my head is when Finn was on the broadcast with Dylan, and I mentioned Finn. I said, Finn, we got to make sure we give some more tidbits about each player. And Finn mentioned that that whatever player it was in his math class. I said, yes, that is absolutely a tidbit. Maybe not exactly what I was going for. I was thinking more basketball related, but that is a good fact. I mean, we had really funny moments like that. Anytime that we do a big home basketball game is fun. So the St. Rose game's a lot of fun. It's stressful for me. And I think we all, rise to the occasion for big games like that. So the St. Rose game was a lot of fun. I actually had a lot of fun at hockey this year.
Yeah, it was fun.
Hockey's not my natural, sport. I do like basketball, probably first, but I had a lot of fun at hockey. Again, I think that it helps when the team is really good. So hockey always had really competitive matchups every time we broadcasted them, especially in the Gordon Conference. But then I just think about our daily interactions, whether it's in homeroom, before school, after school. There's just a lot of we do a good job with the camaraderie in our group, and I think that maybe there's not one dynamite moment, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it's a collection of good feelings throughout the year, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, I feel like definitely that Columbia trip.
Yes.
It was a great moment
Yes.
first, but I feel like it really brought us all together.
Absolutely.
As we were talking about in the first take it recorded a little while ago, I just think it really brought this group together. And even the Nets game trip last year,
Yes.
I think even though everyone was kind of together already, it brought us even closer, especially me and Connor.
Right.
Because me and Connor were kind of more of the heads this year. So
Shout out to Mr. Carino.
Mr. Carino,
Does the play-by-play for WFAN Nets broadcast. He got us into that Nets game. And while Kevin Durant was still on the team, by the way, so I got to see Kevin Durant before he decided to peace out on us. But anyway.
And Kyrie.
I don't really care about him, but I like Durant. So anyway.
All right, well, I got a couple more questions. So even though you said you can't pick a specific moment this year, were there specific moments over the course since 2017 when the digital network first started that you could point out that you remember really well and that were great moments, especially before my time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one thing, and this is really general, but I've realized it more each year because we just did it 2 weeks ago. Every time now that we graduate kids, there's something about that. Again, I think I'm getting old, so I'm getting nostalgic. But once we started graduating classes of students from whether it's the class or the homeroom or just general members of the group, it's a special moment for me. And I think about, we talked about Jack and Aiden and Jack Hipschman and Shane Brennan and your brother Jonathan. And there's a lot of kids where I look back in when we start graduating kids over time, I'm like, wow, we're doing something special. And I think any teacher in this school probably is going to say the same thing, whether they're a history teacher or a science teacher or they're, I'm sure Mr. Roscoe feels the same way with Pegasus, and every coach feels the same way with each of their teams, because I know as the sailing coach, I have the same feeling. When I graduate a group of seniors from the sailing team, I'm like, wow, those were some 4 years. And so every year we have a graduation now. We just graduated Connor, Ben, and TJ a couple weeks ago, and I remember taking a picture with them, and I'm like, I love that picture. That's a special picture for me. I make sure we post it on the digital network Instagram because it's just, they deserve the shout out because how much work they put in. But I think about all-time moments, and that first Founders Cup game where I was lucky enough to do the broadcast myself on air with Matt McMullen as he graduated with me here from CBA. He's a basketball 1,000-point scorer. Yeah, he grew up in Brick where I grew up. So him and I had a lot of connections. So that was special doing that with him and then making that the first broadcast. I think about every Founders Cup we've had at home since then. Oh, yeah. I think there was a game that next year. And I remember Steven Braunstein, who was class of 2019, he was a really good, shooting guard, small forward on our basketball team. He rose up for a dunk in whatever the next Founders Cup we hosted. And I can't remember who was on the broadcast. But I just remember that like electric moment on the broadcast and thinking like, oh, that's a highlight. And I think it's cool that we put out highlights. So like, oh, that's a high. I'm always thinking like, what's the highlights we can put out? I think any Founders Cup game we've done here at home is definitely an all-time moment. But I do like the trips. We went to the Nets game last year thanks to Mr. Carino. We went to Columbia this year. We've gone to Columbia a couple times in the past, but I do think, and your brother will remember, the trip to ESPN, Seaport Studios, thanks to CBA alumnus Tony Reale. He was generously invited us actually twice. Because we split it in half. We thought it would be better in small groups. So we did half a group and half a group. And we went twice. So I was lucky enough to go twice. But we went to ESPN Seaport Studios. We got to see where they film Around the Horn, where they film Get Up and First Take with Stephen A. Smith. We got to meet Stephen A. And Tony Reale was just so nice and really appreciated, being able to do that. I hope that somehow we could do that again in the future. Obviously, the pandemic gave us a blip, and that was in the spring of 2019 we went to ESPN. So it was pre-pandemic, but we're starting to get back to trips. We went to the Nets game. We went to Columbia. So we're starting to get back to that. I would love to do more trips because like you said, I think you even said, like, that stands out to you, right? And so I think that that's impactful. So I think anytime a student broadcaster or a student journalist can do a big game or go on a trip that's educational but also exciting, because again, you learn a lot at, you think about the Nets game we went to last year, like Mr. Carino and his partner Tim Capstraw, like they showed you guys the whole radio setup, right? Yeah. You guys got to listen, right? Put the headset on. And I'm sure you could say right now, like, it was probably a great experience, right?
Oh yeah, it was very, very educational for me. I wasn't really big into podcasting yet, and then once I went on that trip, my personal podcast with John Lakeman, Sounds of the Shore, talking to teachers that started this year, it's inspired me. Right. I was very educational, as well as the Columbia trip that inspired me to do more television type stuff and more podcast type stuff.
Absolutely. So I think anytime we can do that, where we go on a trip. I know I'm straying away from the all-time favorite moment question, but I think this is just, it's tough. It's actually way tougher to pick, like even this year. Like, it's tough to pick a favorite moment. I think more about the kids that were in the group, and I think more about what the experience was rather than saying it was an all-time moment. I mean, again, I mentioned them before. I'll mention them one more time before we end this, but like, I'm going to miss Connor, Ben, and TJ a lot. Obviously, Connor Dugan, I mean, that kid was in this from freshman year. I think there's a picture now sitting in my office his mom gave me of his first broadcast, which was swimming state championship in 2020. Right before the shutdown of the pandemic, he was on air as a freshman commentating the swimming state championship. That's the last, actually, state championships in swimming that we've won, so it's also special to Connor in that way, and also us being able to do the broadcast. And then, Ben as the Colt Morning News reporter this year. And TJ was really good at doing those live updates from Appalachia and from Ireland. And, like, those are just cool things to be able to do. And, again, you joined right away as a freshman. I remember you helping us at soccer, like, right away. And it was in the pandemic, right? So, like, we had, like, a disjointed way of, being in touch. But you were showing up, helping at soccer games. And we could go off a laundry list of, like, kids who got involved right away, like you did, like Connor did, like your brother did. I remember your brother helping me with, he was doing PA music.
Oh yeah, I remember
He was in charge of doing playlists for the basketball games and running them over the PA during timeouts and during like halftime and all that. And then that transitioned to him being part of the digital network in terms of broadcasting. But little things get you in the door, right? Like, and I think that's the best. Like, if I was to give advice for kids as they leave here, like those little things, I mean, they're trivial now. Me talking about your brother doing the PA system music, it's trivial in the scope of life, but like that's a perfect example of like just in a smaller scope, he got his foot in the door and he ended up being a really dedicated member of the digital network, and same thing with a bunch of kids. And so, every graduating class now is special, and that's why, I would say the kids are the reason I'm still here today. Oh. I'm not sure, I'm not sure what would happen, and I'm sure every other person who works in this school would say the same thing, is that, like, hey, there's a lot of, just like in any job, there's a lot of stuff that goes on around the scenes that can dishearten you. But the kids here at CBA, whether it's with you guys in the digital network, any of the kids in my classes, any of the kids on the sailing team, you guys are the reasons I come back every day. It makes for a long day, I can tell you that, because I'm here early. I'm here early for both our period zero, homeroom, all that stuff that happens in the morning. And then I go to sailing practice in the afternoon. So it's a long day. But I always say the best parts of my day are the bookends, right? The morning with you guys, the afternoon with my team, like those are what makes it special. And I think that's what makes CBA special in general.
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Lutz. Anything else you have to say before we wrap it up for the season finale of Talking to Teachers?
No, I commend you and Nick Harari and John Lakeman for getting this podcast off the ground. Thanks for having me on as the last one of the year, but I'm excited. I'm really excited that we've kind of had this template now where we could start this up from day one in September. And I think podcasting is a cool outlet. It's easy. I mean, we got the video camera on right now, but and that's just to provide a little bit of a visual. But I think that this is something really cool, and I'm excited for you guys. And we got a good group again next year. We're formalizing and finalizing that homeroom. We had Colt Morning News Reporter tryouts this morning, so we're formalizing and getting next year ready. And I'm sure it's going to be another great year.
I'm looking forward to it. So, wrapping up the season finale of Talking to Teachers. We'll see you next year. For Mr. Lutz, I'm Chris Height. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.